to Forewarned, Forearmed with episode 6. So, today's episode we're going to cover something that has been asked from one of the members of the community, and that is to talk about the Soviet leaf blower. So, for those unfamiliar with the leaf blower, it is a hind horde list. Now, while I think this list is quite interesting in the fact that it does have a lot of hinds, I don't see it in comparison to the leaf blower lists from another game system, just for the pure fact that it doesn't have an alpha strike capability. I don't believe it has an alpha strike capability, and I don't see it having an alpha strike capability. And these are the reasons why. So, the reasons why I don't see it as having an alpha strike capability is because it's already on the board. Especially with the rules in regards to the VDV with air Afghancy with the air assault rule, which means if you have less than 60% of your force, it has to be on the field. So you already know what's there. And unfortunately, unlike Flames of War, Team Yankee is AA abundant. Like, there is plenty of options, cheap options for multiple anti-air units. NATO forces in general, and even those in Nordic, come with a lot of anti-helo weapons attached to their AFBs. So there is plenty of counters to this list. So I don't see it as a pure Alpha Strike list. I think if you want to go for a pure Alpha Strike list, you'd be probably better off playing something that has a real good chance of pushing, and that would be like T55 spam. Just for the pure psychological fact and rushing with so many tanks up the field. That, to me, would be a pure Alpha Strike list. Alpha Strike lists previously, now this was under the old V1 rules, I would have counted like Leopard 2s prior to V2, just for the pure fact that you could spearhead off a spearhead and get within like 8 inches of the deployment zone and park Leopard 2s or M1A IPMs. And there wasn't much that could counter it back then. So they were very, very alpha strikey as well. But that's changed now, just purely because of the new spearhead rules and because there is a lot more abundant AT out there now. Hence Eric's and RPG7s. Heaps and heaps of armor to deal with that. Anyway, so we'll have a look at a couple lists I came up with. One is the pure Afghancy with all the bells and whistles in regards to having heaps of helicopters and your frogfoots for your anti-tank capability. The other, on the other hand, is a list I deem quite outrageous, and to be fair, has a lot of helos, and it does hurt the wallet just trying to get all that. And I think that's the one thing about spam, is it does hurt the wallet. Like, if you're trying to play games on a budget, spam is definitely not the way to go. You probably want something more elite, like a NATO force or even T80s. Shock. T80 shock. 7 T80s is nearly 80 points. So, yeah, that's something I would look at if I was on a budget. Alright, the list. Let's have a look at them. So, first up, the Soviet list. It has your stock standard Afghancy. It comes in around about 45 points with support. The reason why I've done the multiple helicopters is just for the pure fact, plus your frogfoots, heaps and heaps in there. I included T80s purely for the fact that at most you're only going to have 2 units in reserve with this list, which would be the frogfoot and the T80s for 100 points. I think that's the only way you can really use this list effectively, is to make sure you have your reserves down pat, especially if you're going to have less than 60% with air Afghancy. Second list is a really interesting list. So the second list I've come up with is a Syrian BTR mech list with allied air Afghancy. So this one has a total of 20 hinds. I say that again, 20 hinds. It's probably one of the more scarier hind lists that you can actually get for 100 points, just for the pure fact there's a lot of hinds. If you're up against a very elite army with very limited air support, or anti-air against this air support list, it's quite tricky to face. I did include like the 5T72s just so you can actually bump up and get a few things in support, or to put in reserve for this list. Again, reserves are a bit tricky for this one because you have to reserve quite a few things. Like your AF Gunsy is going to be on the list and that only leaves you like 15 points. So realistically, that would only be the Carnations and maybe some BTRs on the field. And that's pretty much it. And the rest is all in reserve. And this is why I don't usually play Hind list. Just pure fact that you have a lot that has to be on the field. If I'm going to use Hinds, I'll probably use them as a support asset rather than actually in a formation for that very reason. So the way I would play either one of these lists is hoping to either maneuver. The reason why I say that is because I want to try and avoid meat engagement as much as possible so I don't have to worry about it. But if I do have to go attack and get meat engagement, it does also play out because all my helicopters have to come off the field. That's just meat engagement rules because they loiter off. However, the benefit of being a Soviet player in that regard is the fact that your missiles already count as moving. So it doesn't really impact on Hinds as much. It just means that you just got to rush as much as possible and hope that the enemy doesn't affect you for air. AA as much as possible, and that's probably the biggest takeaway against Hinds is AA. Like against something like my Dutch list, it would not be good. It would just be very messy. Having 9 PTRLs in that list is just pure carnage against a list like this. Just for the sheer weight of fire that it has. Like, if I had to, I'd probably try to split between a couple of units, and then on top of that, all the Dutch AFVs have anti-helo as well. So it's like, yeah, it's only one shot, but weight of fire, it downpours a lot of Hinds. On top of that, the other thing to be wary about is ATGMs. They do run the risk of the penalty for shooting at you for rate of fire 1 weapons. However, they can hit you, just for the pure fact that they have guided. And that's another thing, so that, British spam lists, where you're running like upwards of 12 to 14 Milans in a list. Again, against the Hind list, it's like, if you don't have that many tanks, I'm just going to use the Milans against the helos. So it defeats the purpose, and then I'm just going to submission you into depth with mortars, because British mortars at 4 points for 8 is just ridiculous. It's one of the cheaper options I like, but it's just 8 tubes for 4 points. It's very, very nasty, especially if repeat. Anyway, back to the helos. So I think if you're going to play this, you definitely have to seed. For those who don't know what seed is, it's suppression of enemy air defense. I'll put a link down to some, good articles about it, where you can find more information. There is a great article about this already on BF's website. I will put that link in there for you. So, again, I just don't like Hind lists. They're not really the leaf blower, I would say they are. Most people do think that they are a leaf blower, but it's not. Once you actually realise all your counters to them, you'll tend to start rolling those back into a more support option, because you'll find that too many helos takes up too much points for other things that you could use much more wisely and much more effectively, which is upgrades for your infantry, upgrades to other units, even roll out a second formation, and run like BTRs with T80s, all those things with, that are a lot more better lists than a Afghansi list. If you wanted like a theme list, yep, go for it. I could see it being run as a theme list, but to me that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day, and that is because it's a themed list. Again, I think tips for using them is to play them conservatively, pick your targets, go straight away for air defense. You have to with that amount of hinds. You run the risk of losing a lot of your hinds against air defense up front, but I think if you're able to clear all the air defense, it comes off quite nicely. But it depends on how much air defense is out there. Units or lists that generally don't have that much air defense are Brit lists and US lists. Just for the pure fact, people go, oh, I've got shrapnels or rapiers, I'll just take them. I only need the one unit, and because they're quite costly as well, like 6 points. But if you're really thinking of it, if you go up against another Soviet player, it's like multiple units of Gaskins, so like 2 points for 4. Enough Gaskins on the field, and that's quite interesting, like 6 points for 12 Gaskins. Round there, I was out with some either Gophers or Shukas. Again, that's very hard to play against with that amount of Gaskins or Shukas on the field. And then if you think about it, Warpack, Czechs get cheaper everything. So they can even spam Gophers in there and Shukas for 3 points for 4. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode on the leaf blower, and some pro tips of counters and how to use them. I think if you're going to create a list like this, be mindful that there's plenty of counters out there. It will have a psychological impact, but once people get over that, it's easy to counter. Here in Australia, we've only seen a couple of people use it, and it generally gets destroyed quite quickly just for those pure factors that, you know, as I said, air defense is quite common in this game, and the amount of stuff that's anti-helo for certain units is quite abundant as well. So thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you like, please subscribe, tell your friends about it, and good hunting out there. Cheers, bye.